everyone out there, how are you doing? You're listening to The Tim Laskis Show, and I'm Tim Laskis, and this is episode 48. And hey, how many of you out there are interested in launching your own podcast? Raise your hand. If you were like me, I initially thought, yeah, podcasting sounds cool, but I just don't have the time. Well, let me tell you, I figured out, I got all the shortcuts, I got it all down. So why don't you head over to my website at timlaskis.com and pick up your free cheat sheet on how to launch a podcast. All right, so go to timlaskis.com and pick up your free how to launch a podcast cheat sheet today. You have no more excuses. Go get it, timlaskis.com. And now, today's guest is Mark Greene. Mark is an auto enthusiast, and he is one guy who just loves cars. He has a podcast show that's all about cars 5 days a week, and he talks to all sorts of people who have cars. I mean, they may be industry executives, but he also talks to artists, celebrities, journalists, authors, even some of the racers, and he really has made this podcast unique. He talks about how to brand a podcast, and that's all he's doing. He's podcasting, and he's figured out how to monetize it and be successful, and he shares his story today. So enjoy.
The Tim Laskis Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests, entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskis.
Well, hello, everyone. Today's guest is Mark Greene. Mark, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Hey, Mark, you were telling me that your favorite car is the Ford Pinto. Tell us about it. A brown one, right? Is that what you drive around town?
You must have been talking to a different Mark, I think. You know, I do have a saying, though, and I'll just say this. If it rolls on rubber, I love it. So I do like all cars, but no, I don't drive a Pinto.
Well, what's right? What do you got against Ford Pintos?
Nothing.
Are
They're
you
wonderful
biased?
cars. They'll get you from A to B. They just won't do it in very much of a style, and they're kind of slow. So that kind of works against my two main focuses with cars.
And they don't they blow up if you get hit from the rear end or
Well,
something?
you know, I won't even go too deep into that, but I think a lot of that stuff was just made up by somebody. You know, a lot of cars will blow up if they get run into in the back. So, you know, I'm not going to pick on Ford. It's, you know, they make great cars. So.
For sure. And the reason we're talking about this is because you are the car guy. So tell us a little bit about your passion with cars and what is it that you really drive around town?
Oh, my goodness. Well, we're going to have to go longer than a half an hour if we're going to talk with me about cars. So I'll do my best to condense this a little bit. I'm a car guy. Yeah, I love cars. I've loved cars since I was a little kid. I grew up in Southern California where there's definitely a car culture back in the 60s and 70s. Loved cars. I even started a detailing business when I was in junior high, and I started detailing cars, and that's how I paid for my car habit and my surfing habit. Bought me some surfboards so I could go out in the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, and enjoy that. But I really do love cars, and I ended up working for about 21 years in a company called Grio's Garage. It was a startup when I joined. I was responsible for all the marketing, branding, and merchandising. I was the president of the company, and we sold car care products and car products for people to use on their cars in their garage. And I was responsible for all the creative parts, so all the marketing and brochures and website and that kind of fun thing. But it put me in that environment, and I left there about, almost 4 years ago, and was trying to find something new to do. And I came up with this idea of a podcast. Actually, my son came up with the idea for me because I didn't know what a podcast was. And I started Cars Yeah. And Cars Yeah is a podcast where I interview inspiring automotive enthusiasts. These are people who've wrapped their passion for cars into their lives and their careers. All sorts of different people, from celebrities to racers to people that run concours events, people that own businesses around cars. All sorts of different people. I just this morning recorded my 760th show in just over 2 years. So
Congrats.
Thank you. I've talked to a lot of people, but I love cars. And as far as your question about cars I drive, I've enjoyed for many, many years, mostly German sports cars, Porsches and BMWs. So right now in my garage, There's a BMW M3, which I would call my daily driver, although I work from home, so I don't drive it as much as I used to. And I also have a very cool collector car, a 1987 Porsche 930 Turbo that I bought on eBay about 5 years ago. I think it's about the 10th or 11th 911 that I've owned over time. Really fun car, fast car, enjoyable, but it's a collectible, so it's kind of my baby. I don't take it out in the rain, and living here in the Pacific Northwest means it doesn't get driven nearly enough.
Oh, what's the upkeep like on one of those? Is there a lot of maintenance that you have to do?
There would be if you drove it a lot, but I don't drive that car a lot. So it doesn't really need a whole lot. I don't put that many miles on it. But if you use it as a daily driver, yeah, you'd probably have to do more upkeep than a modern car now, because cars have gotten so good about needing very little care. The Porsche 911 eats a lot of gas, eats a lot of oil I shouldn't say it eats a lot of oil. I should just say that it will use oil. It's a dry sump engine, so the car has about 11 and a half quarts of oil in it that keep that engine cool because it's air cooled or oil cooled. There's no radiator or anything, but just a really fun car. I take it to car events, I take it to car shows, take it on rallies and tours and things like that.
Wow. Do you get a lot of winks? Do people try to pick you up when you're driving?
Well, no.
What'd your wife say?
No, she doesn't worry about me because nobody's looking at me. They're looking at the car. So I don't have to worry about that too much. But, up here in the Pacific Northwest, there is a car culture, not quite as huge as Southern California where I came from. But there's a lot of cool people up here with cool cars, a lot of cars and coffee events on Saturday morning that I can go to and take the car and hang out with guys and just, have bull sessions, talk about cars, talk about their cars, look at their cars. So, but it does attract attention. This car was a special order car. It's painted metallic orange, so it stands out. It kind of glows a little bit. So, but it's a turbo, so it needs to be something special.
For sure. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. And you mentioned celebrities, and a celebrity that comes to mind in cars was James Dean. There's that old black and white photo of James Dean. What was he driving? It was a convertible.
He was driving a 550 Porsche Spyder when he was killed. And James Dean was obviously an actor, but he really loved cars, not unlike some of the more modern people like Steve McQueen. I've actually had Steve McQueen's son, Chad McQueen, on my show.
Very cool.
Steve McQueen was an actor who loved cars. And who's the guy, let's see, that Paul Newman, I was thinking of the salad dressing guy, but Paul Newman was a big-time car guy, and both of those guys had documentaries created out of them. But James Dean was driving a 550 Spyder. I actually had a 550 Spyder replica for many years that was built by a guy down in California, John Wilhoit. It was a Chuck Beck car. Chuck's been a guest on my show, and so has John. And unfortunately, James Dean was on his way to a race that day, and he turned in front of a guy in a station wagon, and those little cars are tiny. They're made of aluminum, and a big American station wagon T-boned him, and we lost James Dean at a very young age. So sad story.
Tragic, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, another kind of famous actor and kind of car combination, well, there's several, but one that jumps out at me is Magnum PI, and he drove that Ferrari
308. Yeah, 308 GTS convertible. Yeah.
Love that car.
And here's a little side story about that. If you'll notice, the top was never on that car because that guy, Tom Selleck, is a very tall man. I got to meet him down at a volleyball tournament that my wife drugged me to. I don't know why she wanted to go see him. Maybe because he's kind of handsome.
Handsome.
Yeah, but he's a very tall man. And when they gave him that car to drive in Magnum PI, he jumped in it and he said, I don't fit in this thing. And so they had to keep the top off because his head was higher than the top of the car. So there's a little insider scoop about why Magnum PI always had the top off of his GTS, and the GTS signifies that it was a convertible 308 instead of a coupe.
That's a great backstory on that. I didn't know that. And then kind of the more recent and tragic event was the actor from the Fast and Furious who had died in a car accident. I don't know if he was going to or from a car show, I believe.
He was actually at a garage where they stored a bunch of his cars with a friend of his, and they took the car out like a lot of car guys do to kind of drive. It was a warehouse area, industrial area, and they were going to drive down a back street where there wasn't really any traffic. And They simply were driving too fast, and Paul was not driving. The other guy was driving. It was a Porsche, I think it was a 959, and they lost control of the car. And one of the problems that people have is when they take a very high performance car out and drive it too fast before the tires get warmed up and before everything is working right, it's very easy to lose control. And they tragically, I think they hit a light pole and the car burst into flames, and both those gentlemen died. Horrible, horrible story. You got to be careful because these cars
What was
are
the actor's
fast.
name?
Paul Walker from
Paul
the
Walker is
Fast
the
and
one.
Furious fame. Yeah, Paul just, again, died at a very young age. Tragic accident. Very sad. But you got to be careful when you've got high-performance cars.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's move right along. You got this love of cars, and then you went into podcasting. And for me, I just can't rave enough about podcasting. I mean, I've only been doing it a short period of time, and it's really kind of changed my life. And so what was it about podcasting that kind of brought you into it, and what's been your kind of experience up to now with over 700 shows?
I know, it's a little bit crazy, isn't it? Well, I'll tell you what. I'd left my previous job. I'd been there for 20 plus years. The job before that, I worked for 11 years. So I don't really job hunt around or pop around at all. And my son was home from college. And usually when a father walks with his son, the son looks at the father and says, "What should I do with my life?" And in this case, my son Blake was in college. But instead I said, "Blake, what am I going to do with my life?" I wanted to do something else. I'd helped two people build their own businesses. And he said, "Dad, you've been taking me to car shows and vintage races my whole life. What's the one thing I always tease you about? You can't walk by a guy without stopping, asking about his car, asking about his business. What if you did something like that?" And I said, "How do you make money doing that?" Going to car shows and talking to people. He said, "No, have you ever heard of this thing called podcasting?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, when I'm in school, when I'm in my lab classes, I listen to podcasts. And they're really cool. You should check them out. What if you did a podcast where you talk to people about their cars and their businesses?" And there came the light bulb. And I started investigating podcasting, looking into it. I started listening to every podcast I could listen to. I had no clue what I was doing. And I kind of connected with this podcast group that you're a part of as well, the Podcast Paradise with John Lee Dumas, very successful podcaster. And I looked at what he did and I said, okay, maybe I can create a brand around me that does all of that. So I started writing a business plan. I started learning about podcasting, and Cars Yeah was the name I came up with. My mantra I mentioned earlier, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, has a double entendre. I'm interviewing inspiring automotive enthusiasts in hopes that I will inspire others who have not figured out how to wrap their passion for cars into their careers. And by listening to people who figured it out, maybe they can figure it out too. And I set off very ambitiously. I said, you know what? I'm going to build this as fast as I can. I'm going to do 5 shows a week, Monday through Friday. I designed and created my own website. I'm a good designer. I've done that as a profession, but I never actually built one, so I figured it out by watching a lot of YouTube videos. I figured out how to do all this recording stuff that you and I do, and set up a show and set up a website. And 5 days before I launched, I had no shows recorded, and a PR gal called me and said, "I found your website just by kind of browsing around cars, and you don't have any people on your show, though. What's going on?" And I told her I'm trying to get started. She goes, "Well, I have a client that would like to be your first guest." And there I was set. And since then, I have not missed a show yet. It's pretty incredible to me, too. So like I said, this morning I recorded my 760th show in 2.5 years. So it's been a fun ride.
Well, that's something else. And what would you say, now looking back, there's so many different areas of expertise and things you got to do to put this together. What do you think was the most challenging for you in putting your podcast together?
Well, as I mentioned, my background is marketing, design. It's really multifaceted. So from the side of what was easy, doing all of the marketing and branding and that kind of thing was the easy part. The hard part so far has been building enough of an audience that advertisers look at me with some credibility. And that's why I decided to do 5 shows a week, because as I first started reaching out to guests, a lot of my guests don't know what a podcast is even today. They don't know what they are. They think they're on a radio show or something like that. So educating people about podcasting and finding these guests, lining up 5 shows a week. I wouldn't say it's been hard, but it's a lot of work. And it's a process of educating people, being very professional. I'm very good at reaching out and communicating with people, so that hasn't been a problem. But it's just building that network and that audience so that, again, these advertisers will look at me and say, yeah, you're credible. So I've got advertisers. I monetized within about 4 or 5 months. I had some people reaching out to me. And like all of us, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm getting there. And more people are becoming aware of me. And it's led me to some really interesting contacts. I've done some consulting work for people. Talk to people about doing all sorts of different things. I've aligned myself with Concours events and with different people in the world. I get a call every week from somebody that I totally, wow, how did they find me? So the challenge is, I think the biggest challenge that people getting into podcasting need to realize, this is a lot of work. So if you just think this is going to be an easy evening type thing, and if you're going to try to pump out as much work as I'm doing, it won't work. I work a lot of hours to make this whole thing happen because I do everything myself. I do absolutely everything myself because I wanted to understand every facet of it. But it's just a lot of work. But you know what? That's the point. If you're doing what you love, and I get to talk to people from all over the world. This morning I did a show with a guy in Belgium, and this afternoon a guy in New York, and tomorrow I'm doing a show with a guy in France. I mean, even I have to pinch myself sometimes because I'll get on the phone with somebody that has been a hero of mine in racing forever. And I'm going, you mean I'm talking to Vic Elford, or I'm talking to a celebrity like Spike Feresten who has a TV show, or Adam Carolla, or whoa, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it is. There's a lot that goes into podcasting that people don't realize. But there may be someone out there who's listening, who's thinking of a podcast, or even maybe they have a podcast. And I think you brought up something that a lot of people are going to struggle with, and that's building their audience. Yep. What has been 1 or 2 kind of key pieces for you that's helped you build your audience?
A lot of social media. I use social media a lot to find people. So I have 2 Facebook pages, Instagram. I do Snapchat when I'm at events. I use LinkedIn extensively, which has been very helpful in finding both listeners and people that want to be on my show. Just before we got on the phone here, somebody called me and found me on LinkedIn because I post all my shows there and said, hey, I'm a guy that does, I build hot rods, and you got a lot of guys on your show that build cool cars. How do I get on your show? And so people are starting to come to me so I don't have to go to them to be on the show because they're seeing me. It's about dedicated, consistent content. You have to be out there in front of people all the time. So sometimes social media is fun, and sometimes it's like, I don't want to go on Facebook again. I'm just so tired of being there because of all the stuff that's there. But that would be my key element of hope for people, is you've just got to embrace all this. And my audience tends to be an older audience, so sometimes they struggle a little bit with some of the nuances of new techie type things. I cater to an older audience. I say older, 45 to 65, 70-year-old, but for sponsors, that's the sweet spot because those people have money and they spend money.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of social media, so you're using a lot of different sites: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn,
Twitter. Yep.
Twitter. When you're posting, are you only just posting like, okay, today's guest is this, today's guest is this, today's guest is this?
No.
Or are you intermixing that with like you sit with your dog, hey, today I'm eating I'm eating Cheerios. Like how does that work? And
I mix it with a lot of things. Here's what I do. Of course, every morning I post the show that goes live that day on all these different social media sites. Every evening I post the show that's going up tomorrow. But during the day at set times, I'll go and do a lot of things. I'll repost notices that are put up by past guests because I try to become a Facebook friend and a social media friend with every one of my guests. And if they're active, they're posting things about their business. So for instance, if you're a car builder and you posted, hey, check out this new Porsche I'm building, I'll repost that on all my sites and say, hey, Tim just built a cool Porsche. He's been a guest on my show. And if you want to listen, here's a link. And I'll put a link back to that show. I'm just now, literally this week, starting to do videos where I will do a short 1-minute video of me in my environment, my studio, talking about something. A lot of my guests that come on the show are authors, and they'll give me a book and we'll do a book giveaway. So I'll read their book, and I'm starting to do videos where I'll say, hey, I just read this cool book. Like right now I'm in the process of reading a book called Carality by a future guest, Dan Jones, who's going to be on the show. And so I'll do a little video post about that. One of my sponsors makes car covers. So when it snowed a couple months ago, I went out and took a quick little video of their cover on one of my cars with snow all over it and said, hey, check this out. Thank goodness I've got a Covercraft car cover on my car because snow won't hurt the car. So I try to do as many of those things. And when I go to car events, I try to post a lot of stuff. Meetups with people who've been on my show, people I want to have on my show, Snapchats, little videos. I'm doing a lot of different stuff. So any chance to reach out and touch and talk about anything about cars, I do it.
Well, I love that. And it sounds like you're doing so much more than just listen to me, listen to me, listen to this.
It's all about my guests for me. I really, like you mentioned, me sitting with my dog or eating popcorn. I don't do any of that. Everything I put out there is not about me. It's about a guest or an event or someone I met at an event, somewhere I'm going, somewhere I should be going. I've done a lot of creative co-marketing with different events. I do a lot of things with Concours events, and what I've done is reached out to Concours events, which are car shows, and I've said, look, I will interview your sponsors. It's an added bonus to your sponsors to be exposed on my show. If you'll in turn give me some advertising on your website and in your brochures. So I do a lot of trading that way, so I don't have to pay for that. But in return, they send me 4 or 5 guests. So like, for instance, next week, I'll be promoting the Keels and Wheels car show in Texas. And I've just signed up with a group in Switzerland that's doing a car show. So I think for anyone out there who's listening that wants to, you got to get creative and create relationships with people. Stay in touch with people. I connect via LinkedIn with all my guests. I mentioned Facebook. If they're Instagram, I go on their Instagram. I'm active by noticing. And that's another way I've landed some guests, is by becoming a Facebook friend and liking a lot of stuff they post and making comments. And some of them have even been celebrities that I couldn't get to, but because of my Facebook, they finally said, oh, you support me, I'll support you and be on your show.
Give first, and then
Give first,
you
yeah.
may receive.
Absolutely. It's it's one of those things we've always been told. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Absolutely.
Well, I love that. Now, as running your own podcast and doing all this, you have to be quite motivated. What are some tips in general about, kind of entrepreneurship that will help people who are thinking about kind of leaving their 9-to-5 and maybe they're doing a podcast or doing something else as an entrepreneur? Do you have a couple of tips that will be helpful?
Yes. I mentioned that since college, I've really only had 2 jobs. And I felt like in those businesses, and I was a partner in those businesses, so I felt like I've been an entrepreneur, although I was not the majority owner of those businesses, so I helped build them. But I always treated those companies as if they were exclusively mine. And I would encourage, and I told my kids this, who are both now graduated from college and working, whatever job you have, treat that company like it's yours. So treat everyone in the company like they work for you. That doesn't mean that you are mean to them. It means that you are grateful that they're there and they're helping you succeed. Treat those customers that come in the door like you're the boss. If you're walking down a hall and there's a piece of trash in the hallway, bend over and pick it up. It's not for the janitor to pick up later in the day. It's your business. Be proud of it. So a couple tips I would give people about entrepreneurship is, number one, and after 760 guests, I hear this over and over and over. You have absolutely got to figure out the answer to this question. What am I passionate about? And the second most important question, what do I want to do? And those are hard questions to answer sometimes, but you've got to answer them, because once you figure out what the answers are to those 2 questions, you can start doing that in whatever capacity, whether it's through a podcast or if you want to be a car detailer or you want to own a multi-billion-dollar business. And I had a guest on my show who came over to this country from Ireland with $26 in his pocket, couldn't even get through high school because he was dyslexic. His teacher told me he was an idiot and he was too dumb to learn anything. He's a multi-billionaire now with an international company. But what he did was he answered those questions. He figured out what he was good at and what he was passionate about, and he figured out what he wanted to do. And he started doing it slowly but surely, and he eventually landed in a place where he's very, very successful. So answer those two questions, and then the next step, you just got to start doing it. And if you can't stop your 9-to-5 job, you do it at night. You stop watching TV. You stop doing things on the weekend like going to the beach, and you stay home and you work on your passion so that eventually that starts to earn you money and you can quit that 9-to-5 and you can do what you love. And you know what the great thing about that is? Every day, it's not like going to work because you're doing what you're passionate about. I know it's a cliche, but it's really, really true.
Yes, it so is. And thinking back to, maybe you run around as a kid. Did you have that entrepreneurial spirit back then? Were you pulling a wagon, selling
Absolutely.
candy or whatever?
Yeah, I did. I'll tell you, I started my own business before I was 10 years old. My friend Steve Fitch, I grew up in La Jolla, California. Nice little community, close to the beach, beautiful place to grow up. My friend Steve Fitch and I were both very entrepreneurial. To this day, he's an investment banker in London. He's very successful. And we said, you know what? How can we make some money? And I said, well, what if we start some businesses? So we had a street newspaper that we created. We would go around and write stories about people on our street and sit down at a typewriter. I know a lot of your listeners may be too young to know what a typewriter is, but the old typewriters is way before computers. And we had a street newspaper. We even had an idea to start a street insurance company where we'd insure children's toys. So if they got lost or damaged, we would buy them a new toy. That didn't really work out too well because we didn't really know enough about the insurance industry, but we tried it. We also opened something called the Playboy Bar, and it was a private club in his garage. We built a clubhouse in his garage.
Wait a minute, how old were you?
8 years old, 9 years old.
A Playboy
Bar.
An 8-year-old Playboy club.
Yeah, it's not as horrible as it sounds. We called it that because it was for boys only. We didn't allow girls. And we would invite guys in, and we figured out that we could serve drinks. And we had drinks like root beer, soda, Sprite, Coca-Cola, but we called root beer beer. Scotch was Coke. Scotch and water was Coke and Sprite. And we figured out if we bought these big liter jugs of soda and we put 5 ice cubes in the cup, we could sell the cup for 10 cents and we would make 50% margin on each cup, because if the more ice, the less Coca-Cola was going in there. We would clear $20 on a Saturday, and we had all these guys come in. We had all these car magazines and stuff laying around, and we called it the Playboy Bar. And then I started a paper route, which is a very entrepreneurial way to be a kid. And when I was 14, I started my own detailing business. And that business actually paid and took me all the way through college. It was a really good way to make money. I was self-employed. I got to be around cars, which I was passionate about. And at one point, I was even hiring people to work for me out of my garage because I had too many cars to wax on my own. So, yeah, I've always been entrepreneurial, definitely.
Wow, you're like the original Hugh Hefner.
Well, I'm not as successful as he is, and I'm not really sure I'd want to make my money the way he did. But,
did you have a smoking jacket too as well?
No, we didn't have any smoking jackets, although I will tell you, my sister wanted to come and work for us and make money, so I told her she could be a waitress. And we actually made her some bunny ears, and my mom caught wind of that and stopped that pretty quick. So, and then eventually we got shut down by a neighbor's mom.
Did you get a spanking for that one?
No, my parents never spanked me. I was a pretty good kid, but my mom just didn't like the whole notion of the whole thing. So we had to change the name of the bar and call it something else. But
well, you're something else, a real go-getter, Mark. That is great. I love those stories.
It's fun. It's really fun to be your own boss.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, you're one of the first few guests where I've changed up the kind of the format a little bit, and I have what I call a dig round, where I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions, and I want a quick response.
Ooh, okay. Pressure's on.
The first is what inspires you daily?
What inspires me daily is to get up and talk to people that I've never met before. Because as I mentioned, my show I do from my home. I interview everybody from my desk here, but they're people from all over the world. So I never know what I'm going to get. This podcasting thing with my guests is like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. I've not met most of my guests. So when they call in, it's the first time I've ever talked to them. And there's the excitement of not knowing what's going to happen with that conversation. Some have been a challenge, yeah. Some of them have been a huge delight and excitement. So that's what gets me fired up every morning, because I'm an early riser. I think it was my paperboy days. I get up at 5:45 in the morning, and I'm usually sitting at my desk by 6:15. So, yeah, that's what gets me fired up.
Well, what about crazy hosts? You know, you're on a crazy host show right now. We haven't met before.
Well, you're doing a great job, Tim. Absolutely fantastic.
Well,
yeah, let's go for a drive.
Hey, there you go, in the convertible. Who impresses you as a business leader today?
Oh my gosh. I'm really impressed by people that are disruptors. So Elon Musk would be a good example of one of those people. What he's doing and the kind of places that he's taking an industry, an automotive industry, which is my passion, and really disrupting things and doing it in a super fast way. And of course, he's also flying into outer space, so there's that little issue. So I would think someone like, well, I wouldn't think, he is somebody who really inspires me, because he seems to be somebody that just plows on through and comes up with new ideas. When he and his co-founder got eBay going, and PayPal going, rather, not eBay, but PayPal. I guess eBay owns PayPal now, but I was using eBay a lot. I bought cars on eBay. I bought motorcycles. I've sold cars and motorcycles. I've spent a lot of time buying car parts and things. So when he figured out a way to make it easier for those transactions to happen with PayPal, I mean, those are the kind of people that really make me inspired. I just go, wow. And those are disruptors like Warby Parker, companies like that, or Harry's, or the Dollar Shave Club, these people that are coming into a sector and saying, you know what, there's a better way to do this.
Yes.
That's where I get really fired up.
For sure. And the last one is street smarts versus book smarts. Which is more important?
Oh man, you got me stumped on this one, because I love books. I mean, I have one of the questions I ask all my guests is a book that you would offer. And I love to read business books. I don't read a lot of fiction. I read mostly business books, but you know what? I'm going to go with street smarts, because that keeps you nimble and moving fast and enables you to kind of bounce around these obstacles that fall in your way as you're trying to get through life in your business.
All right. Great answers. Well, now we're going to move on to the next section. We're out of the dig round, but this has to do with, you've been doing this for a while, over 700 shows. There must have been a time or times when you felt like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm burned out. I don't want to do it. I'm sick of it. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about a time when you were just so burned out, and how did you cope?
It wasn't a burnout thing for me. It was more of a frustration, because I wasn't getting to where I wanted to be fast enough. I don't really burn out. I've come from farm stock, I would say. My dad grew up on a farm, and farmers work all the time. And my father was self-employed as an architect. He worked all the time. I remember as a little kid going to his office with him on Saturdays and Sundays. He worked all the time. So I just thought that's what you did. So the idea of people that work from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. And I even get that frustrated when I had people working for me at my past businesses where I was the president. This kind of, the clock is ticking towards 5, time to start wrapping it up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We got work to do. I remember on Fridays, people would say, I'm so glad it's Friday. And I'd say, I wish it was Monday. I've got so much to do. So burnout isn't the issue, but not getting to where I need to be, that's what gets me frustrated. And those are the times where I'll go, I'm just, I'm not getting there fast enough. Maybe I should do something different. And the one thing that always brings me back is a little meme that I made real early on for myself. And I posted it out there on my social pages, I should say. Whenever you think about quitting, stop and think about why you started. And that always gets me back to square one. Why did I start doing this? What were my goals and reasons for doing it? I can't stop. I've got to be successful. There's got to be a way to figure it out. And there is always a way to figure it out. Reaching out to other people, sitting back and taking a breather and going, okay, I really got to take a look at this. Putting your head up, working on your business at least one day a week instead of in it is really key, whether it's a big business or your own person. But stop and think about why you started something. And if the reasons were, going back to my comments earlier, what you're passionate about, what you want to do, then stay the course. And like any good racer, never, ever, never, ever give up.
Love that. And for sure, that's so powerful, is to be able to understand your why, never forget it, carry it around in your front pocket. Mm-hmm. And when it gets a little bit too deep, just take a step back, take a deep breath,
right?
Evaluate the why and jump back in. Well, this next question has to do with your most fulfilling moment. And, I can kind of get a sense of, from some things you've already said about how you may respond. And a lot of it is, you've met so many wonderful people all over the world. Is there someone or kind of something else that really stands out that's been one of those great moments during this journey for you?
The honor of talking to so many successful people who are willing to share their journey with me through the Cars Yeah podcast is the most fulfilling part, really, of what I do. Hearing from those listeners who decided to take that leap and be daring and go out there on an edge is really, really the key part of what I do, and I hope what I'm sharing with others. And the fact that they're willing to spend time with me, because I genuinely feel that time is our most precious commodity. It never stops fighting us. Time never stops. And if we don't use our time wisely, it's a shame to waste time. That's why I don't watch much TV. I try to read books that help me get better and share those things with people. But that factor is the key to what fulfills me along this entrepreneurial journey that I'm on. And even if Cars Yeah doesn't get to where I want to be and I have to pivot and make it into something else, and I have very grand plans for it to be even more than what it is, but other things have to happen first so that I can take those monies and apply it to that. But the fact that these people spend their time talking to me is the most fulfilling piece of the pie here.
Well, Mark, you have been a fantastic guest, so inspiring, and lots of information that you've shared with the listeners today. But before we go, can you tell everyone where they can find you, find your websites, your social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff, and your podcast?
Absolutely. And I want to thank you, Tim, for having me on your show. I really am grateful. It's kind of fun to be on the other end of the microphone here. It's a little odd feeling for me, but, we're just two guys talking about lives and business and so forth. So I really appreciate you having me as your guest. I'll remind your listeners that the Cars Yeah podcast is a 5-day-a-week show. So you listen Monday through Friday. And if you go to my website, carsyeah.com, and if you would like to subscribe, I do a weekly blog that I send out every Tuesday and then a recap every Friday. And I do a lot of giveaways of books. And last Christmas, I gave away almost $3,000 worth of products from my guests that they were very gracious to donate. So you can go to the Cars Yeah, Y-E-A-H website. You can subscribe. Just click on the free Filler Up book, and I'll send you my free Filler Up book, which is a very cool ebook. It's full of about 60 really cool pictures of very unique gas caps. And I know that may sound boring, but you'll never see gas caps like this. These are from classic cars and race cars and so forth. And I filled that book with some very inspirational quotes from many of my past guests. So go there and sign up for the free Filler Up book on the Cars Yeah website. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I have a YouTube account. You can follow me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I just would encourage that if any of your listeners love anything about cars or about business or building businesses, I think that that would be a fun place for you to come and be a part of my pit crew, if you will. And join me on this wonderful journey. And if you're at a Concours event around the country or a racetrack, that would be a cool place to find me at too. I try to go to as many of those events as I can. And I also give talks at club events. I just was invited to give a talk at the North American Automotive Museum Association, which was kind of fun to be a keynote speaker for them. So you can find me a lot of places, or just reach out to me through the Cars Yeah website. Send me an email if you have any questions.
Mark is all over the place. You'll see him in his smoking jacket hanging out.
No, my racing suit. My racing suit.
Oh, the racing suit. Oh, and you forgot one other thing, that you're going to be giving away your brown Ford Pinto to a lucky winner.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anybody can come pick it up and haul it away.
Come pick it up. The tires are flat, but hey, you can put it on the trailer. Mark, thank you very much. You've been a fantastic guest. I look forward to following you on your journey. Take care.
Thank you, Tim. This has been a real joy.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlascos.com.